Hans von Spakovsky is joining us. Of course, Hans, senior legal fellow at Advancing American Freedom. President Trump, a couple of victories at the Supreme Court. Hans, always great to have you on the program. So let's talk about these victories. Great news for President Trump since, of course, he made dealing with and tackling with illegal immigration a cornerstone of his campaign. So I want to take these one at a time, and then we're going to talk about birthright citizenship. But apparently now, with these big wins, Donald Trump can revoke the protections of Syrian and Haitian nationals. Stephen Miller out there saying yesterday, you had a lot of people saying, well, does this mean that Donald Trump is going to start deporting those hundreds of thousands of Haitians and Syrians that are in our country illegally without those protections? And Stephen Miller said yes. So, Hans, give me your take.
Well, presidents have always had the right to do this. What they're talking about is TPS, temporary protected status. And back in 1990, Congress gave the president the ability to provide lawful presence temporarily to aliens from countries that were suffering things like natural disasters. So the Haitians, for example, back in 2010, were allowed to stay here because an earthquake had hit Haiti. The problem is that it was only supposed to be temporary, and yet you have all the Haitians. 2010 earthquake, they were still in the country today. 26 years later. So the president, when he came in, said, "Well, I'm going to end TPS for all these different groups." There were Haitians and Syrians before the court, but as you know, he's also done it for Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, Somalians, etc. Well, he was sued. Lower court said, "Oh, you can't do that. We're enjoining you to stopping you from doing it." And what the court said yesterday is those injunctions are invalid for a very simple reason. The statute that set up TPS has a provision that says there is no judicial review of either the granting of or termination of TPS status. End of story.
So you follow illegal immigration, obviously. You're a legal expert in all of that. So how difficult is it going to be to begin to deport? I mean, you're talking about last time I saw, is it 300,000 to 400,000 Haitians that are here? We all remember, by the way, the visual. Folks remember the visual of all of those Haitians underneath that bridge years ago that the Biden administration tried to hide. Then, of course, Fox News sent over a drone, and Americans were horrified at the crushing number of Haitians that were under that. I think it was a freeway overpass busting into America.
Well, look, no, it's not going to be easy, but with this Supreme Court decision, it means that DHS has the ability, when they find a Haitian or a Syrian or any of the other folks that TPS has been ended for, they have the ability to immediately pick them up, detain them, drive them to the airport, and put them on a plane back to their home countries, and they don't have any ability to go to court and try to stop it. And look, you're talking about the number of Haitians. The estimate I saw for all of the different groups with TPS is over 1 million.
And I would say this is good news. The left is, of course, losing their ever-loving mind. Talk to me about other immigrants or illegal aliens in this country as well. Because I saw one story that said this also means that one of the other things that Donald Trump has been trying to do is deport immigrants or illegal aliens, whatever you want to call them, depending on each individual person, from 13 other terrorism-plagued countries can also be removed. Does this impact, people that are maybe here from, Somalia or some of these other countries?
Yeah, if they're here under temporary protected status granted by prior presidents, the president has the ability to end that status and, like I said, immediately remove them. But look, that wasn't the only decision the Supreme Court issued on Tuesday. I'm sorry, on Thursday. They issued another big immigration case. Once again, it was 6-3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the liberal justices are just willing to twist the law to avoid immigration enforcement. That one was also very simple.
Well, hold on. Hey, Hans, hold on one sec, because we're going to talk about the metering of the Trump administration coming up. I've got to check traffic. This is a great conversation, though, but I've got 15 seconds for traffic on WTN.
Glencliff, 40 westbound before Spence Lane. Accident blocks the right shoulder. Antioch, 24 westbound at Hickory Hollow Parkway. We've got an accident on the right shoulder involving an overturned vehicle. No problems on 65 or 440. I'm Christy O'Brien.
Thank you very much. As far as your weather for today, mostly cloudy, chance of showers and thunderstorms, high around 90. Appreciate you listening to Nashville's Morning News. Hans von Spakovsky joining us on Super Talk 99.7. So, also yesterday, as Hans, you're about to launch into, the Supreme Court ruling that the president can limit asylum seekers coming in from Mexico. Explain the concept of metering and what happened yesterday.
Yeah, actually, this program was started in 2016. So it was the Obama administration that started it. So many aliens were coming through ports of entry that border agents were being overwhelmed. And so they started what they called metering. They would only allow a certain number of aliens in a day. They would process them and then allow them into the country. And they blocked other aliens from stepping across the border. So they remained in Mexico. All those aliens who were blocked and who were not allowed to step across the line sued, saying, because once you're in the U.S., once you've stepped across that line, the aliens who'd been processed could claim asylum.
Yep.
And the aliens who were kept out of the country sued, saying, we are also entitled to claim asylum. And what the 6 justices of the court said, again, this is a very simple case. You can't claim asylum under the law until you have arrived in the United States. And what the court said was, arrived in the United States, what is the ordinary everyday meaning of that? You haven't arrived in, for example, a house until you've crossed across the
threshold.
The threshold and gotten into the house. And so all these aliens, no, they don't have a right to claim asylum because they're here. The 3 liberals, if you can believe this, criticized the majority, saying that they were fixated on the word in. And that therefore we should give asylum rights to people who have arrived on our doorstep. And that's not what the law says. This was a simple law. So in other words, presidents can block, actually close the border. They can block aliens from stepping across the line. And those aliens don't have any rights under American law when they're kept out of the country.
Well, and I just want to get a little bit of perspective from you on this. Sonia Sotomayor, in her dissent, says the consequences of today's decision are predictable. More people will die. More people will attempt to cross the border illegally, and some will make it while others will not. The reality is that Joe Biden had open borders, and so that meant that people felt like they were welcome to come into our country, which under Biden they were. But a lot of people died crossing that desert. And so
that's right.
Donald Trump has often said that his immigration policies and closed border are the more compassionate, because if people know they're not going to get into our country, then they're not going to make that dangerous trek.
No, that is exactly right. But notice what that reveals about Sotomayor. She is, in that statement, she's disagreeing with the policy. She doesn't like the policy. But that's not her job as Supreme Court Justice. Her job is to interpret whether the president was able to do that under the applicable law. And that she refused to do. Instead, she didn't like the policy the president had implemented, and therefore she ruled against it, despite the language of the law that clearly says the president can do this.
Sticking with illegal immigration, no ruling yet on birthright citizenship. Everybody's watching this one. Do you have, number one, a prediction as to when this is going to finally be revealed? That's number one. And I guess number two is the fact that the president has victories in these two illegal immigration or immigration-related policies. Is that an indicator as to how this court will rule on birthright citizenship?
Well, we might get it Monday. Yesterday, after they had released these decisions, they announced Monday as another decision release day. But remember, they've still got, I think, about 10 cases they haven't released decisions on. I don't know if we'll get them all on Monday or whether they'll then schedule another day, perhaps Tuesday or Wednesday. But I'm pretty sure we're going to get it next week, because next week is the end of the Supreme Court's term. They always break for the summer at the end of June. I don't know how this case is going to come out. They've never decided this issue. There are some prior cases on this. The most recent one is 130 years old. The government did have a tough time during the oral questioning, so I think they're battling uphill, and the Trump administration may lose this one. I'm hoping they don't, because they're right on the constitutional issue, but I don't know how it's going to come out.
Hans, you watch the Supreme Court, obviously far closer than I do. Have all these decisions already been made? How did they decide when to release what decision?
Well, they released decisions once everyone has written their opinions. They've either joined the majority opinion, or if they're dissenters, like the three liberals who dissented in all these immigration cases, they have to write their dissenting opinion, and they can't release a decision until all those decisions have been written. And Molly Hemingway recently wrote a book that says that the liberals have been delaying the release of decisions they disagree with by refusing to complete the writing of their dissenting opinion.
No, petulant Democrats, really?
Yes.
Shocking, said no one.
Right.
All right. Well,
right.
Hans von Spakovsky, always great to have you on the program. We'll talk to you again. Maybe we'll talk to you next week if birthright citizenship comes out.
Right. That sounds great. Thanks.
All right, man. Have a great weekend. It is